Frogman Friday.
Yeah, boy. What's up, guys? It's that time again. Welcome to the Frogman Friday Show.
Presented by Transcend, the best peptide and hormone therapy. They put your health first so you can live more and worry less. Go to transcendcompany.com/Birdman to begin your wellness transformation today.
Today, our badass guest is John Walters III, aka J-Dub. He served 25 years as a fireman in FDNY and Port Washington Fire Department, retiring as a chief of department. He served at Squad 288 during 9/11 and would ultimately move to Rescue 1, which are both special operations in the fire service. He's a founding member of Sons of the Flag, which was established in 2012 in Dallas, Texas. You can catch J-Dub on social media, and to take a deeper dive, go follow Bird's Eye View Project on all social media, as we are dropping a documentary this year called Legacy Jump, which has J-Dub's full story. Brother, welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
Dude, we've been together since I got out of the service in 2010, and it's been an unbelievable road of crazy ups and downs. And, you know, it's funny because when I met you, I remember this distinctly, and it has started happening consistently, is when I meet people after getting out, people are like, oh, you're a Navy SEAL. That's pretty awesome. But then I meet you and we started talking. And then you found out my grandfather was a Detroit fireman for 30 years. And you're like,
Yeah.
to hell with that Navy SEAL stuff. Tell me about your granddad in the fire service. That was pretty awesome.
When men were men.
That's right. That's exactly right. So growing up, I had a taste. I never actually spent time in the fire service, in the firehouse when my grandfather served, because he was 1946 to 1976. But he always had fire stuff around his house. And even though he served in the military, he would always talk about his fire service. So digging in at first, let's talk about what made you become a firefighter to begin with.
Pretty much it's all I ever wanted to do as far as I can ever remember. I know my dad was a volunteer when I was a young kid, and then a TV show called Emergency came on TV. I think it was 74 maybe. And I used to watch that every Saturday night. So that was the first real look at the fire service, if you will, other than going to things with my dad and stuff. So that's where it basically started, long as I can ever remember.
You have a brother, and it's cool to see that picture that all three of you were in the fire service at the same time.
Yeah, at the same time, yeah.
That is unbelievable. That's the tradition of FDNY, though. You see a lot of that, right?
Yeah, correct. There's generation after generation after generation. It's a lot of multiple generational firefighters.
It's amazing, man. When I met you, my buddy, our mutual friend Nathan Pilcher, was like, "You got to meet some guys in FDNY. You got to meet my buddy Johnny." And he's like, "He's a rescue guy," and I'm like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Special operations." Like, oh, no way. Fire service has special ops. I'm in. Let's talk about that. So can you explain how it works, going to the Rock, getting into FDNY, and then climbing up the ranks to special operations?
Well, first off, to be a firefighter is a civil service exam. So you have a written exam. Then if you score high enough on it, they invite you to take the physical exam. And then they put the two together and come up with a combined score. And that's how they establish a list in, I guess, a numerical order according to the score. And then on top of that, once you get through that, then they do a psychological test, and then it goes through background checks, and they come knock on your doors, and neighbors, and telephone, and all that kind of stuff. I'm assuming now they do social media. They didn't have that when I joined, but they went through all that, and then they hired, off the list as you went down. They'd ask you, the psychological, I think, was a 1,200 question test. I don't even know if they do that anymore, but
1,200 questions?
Yeah, a lot of repeat questions too. I think they were just looking to trip you up or whatever. And then you have to do an interview with the psychiatrist.
Wow.
And I passed.
Oh my gosh. For those of you who don't know Johnny, that's a shocker.
Yeah.
I mean, what do they want to see? That you're a psychopath, or do they want to see that you operate with empathy, or what do you think they're looking for?
I think they're just looking for repeats, that you're not all over the place. I think that, a lot of the questions were basically the same question asked in a different order. So they're looking for stability. I think that's all.
I see. So when you joined the fire service, you got accepted and you're starting recruit training. Did you have aspirations to go to the rescue company, particularly Rescue One, or what was your initial
No,
goal?
actually, in the volunteer world, I was in an engine company, and the best position in the fire service is the guy with the nozzle in his hand, because he's the one that puts the fire out. And there's a multitude more that goes along with that. But truth be told, I did that for 10 years, and then I got into the FDNY, and then I was like, it opened my eyes to a whole nother world.
Well, they call it, when you've got the nozzle in your hand, is that what they say, ride backwards?
No, in New York, we call it the knob. So they say the knob is the job.
Okay. The knob is the job.
Knob is the job, baby.
That's awesome. So you go in as a volunteer and then you become FDNY.
Yeah.
And at what point did you say to yourself, like, I want to continue to step my game up and, get more dialed in as a fire service
firefighter? When I joined, what they would do is they split all the companies into thirds, A, B, and C. A was the busiest, B was the middle, and C was the slower. It's not exactly on fire duty. It was a lot. How many calls do you go to? How many, a lot of different factors into it. So what they would do is you would be assigned to a company, and then whatever your company you were assigned to, you went to 2 other companies in the first 3 years. 2 of the 3 would be an engine and 1 would be a ladder.
Got it.
So my last stop was in a ladder company that was relatively busy, and did a lot of running. You're doing about 6,000 runs a year. And I caught some good fire duty with it, and it was completely different than anything I did in the engine company. So I thought I really knew what I was doing when I got to the FDNY in the engine world, but not in the truck world. I got to the engine company in the FDNY, realized I was an idiot and had a lot to learn. Then I thought I really knew what I was doing, and then I got to a ladder company and realized I was an idiot and had a lot to learn. Then when I was in the truck company, people started talking about the squad company. There was one squad company in Brooklyn. It was called Squad One, and they did both. And they did some rescue company stuff too. And I said, well, that's really cool. We get to do a little bit of everything. So I was like, I'm going to try out for that. I didn't have enough time on the job at the time, but you'll appreciate this. AOL had just come out, and I got into one of those chat rooms, and I ended up seeing the captain in the chat room. So I sent him a message like, how do you go about getting there? And he told me, like, get some time under your belt, son, and then come talk to me.
Wow. That's that dial tone stuff.
Yeah. Dial up internet. Yeah. You had to find a room.
AOL Messenger.
Yeah. You were probably about 6, but
hey, shut up. So, it's true though. That's incredible. So you had to try out for a squad.
Yeah. So Ray Downey, who was killed on 9/11, was the father of special ops for the FDNY. Him and a bunch of other guys came up with the concept of the squad company expansion, was to expand it from 1 to 7 squads. Basically because they knew terrorism was becoming a big thing throughout the world, and they wanted to expand their special operations capabilities. Because if you're there's 5 rescue companies, and if you're stuck on a dive job or whatever, then they're not in service, there's no backup. So they wanted to have some redundancy built into the entire system.
So walk us through what a squad company does as opposed to a ladder or truck or engine.
All right, so a squad company has a rescue pumper, basically. Looks like an engine with a lot of more compartments on it. Carries a full complement of tools like a ladder company or a rescue company has, enough to get started. So basically they can go to any kind of fire. If they're first, second, or third due in their little response area, they operate as an engine company, as any other engine company would. If they're outside of their area, they respond on a confirmed emergency, confirmed fire, confirmed whatever special ops they need them for. Could be high angle, could be confined space, hazmat, weapons of mass destruction, could be any of that. So, extrication of any type. There's a bunch of different disciplines that they go through. So they basically have the same training, go to the same school as the rescue company, but have a little bit less of the toolbox on the rig because they have the engine capabilities too. So basically, you go to the fire, and the incident commander could use you as an engine. They could use you as a ladder. They could use you as a rescue. They could use you as whatever.
Got it. So you went to, when you got accepted and you tried out, you went to Squad 1 to start?
No, I actually, when they expanded to go from 1 squad to 7 squads, I knew the captain of the squad going to North Queens. So I contacted him, and lo and behold, he was taking me. And then I got a phone call that he was taking another member first. He asked me if I wouldn't mind. He was taking a guy from Rescue Company 1 who was just looking to cut his commute down in the last couple of years of his career. So he was basically moving closer to home, his firehouse home, closer to home, and staying in his special operations command. So I was like, "Hey, Cap, I got 3 years on the job. I'm not going anywhere. So take me when you can,
Yeah.
So that's what he did.
It's not like you get to choose where you go. You just want to get in.
The captain of each squad and each rescue handpicks his own crew.
Got it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you're at the squad. Now you're doing a little bit more of the special operations stuff. What's that like? Walk us through a day in the life of that.
Well, it's somewhat like a regular firehouse where you have committee work in the morning, taking care of business of the firehouse, and laundry and dishes and all the rest of that stuff. But most of the downtime is a lot different. The downtime is a lot more training, a lot more talking about actions. There's a lot more critiques of an incident. It's just a lot more A-type personalities, where guys that are 100% into the job.
Interesting. Are all those guys trying to get picked up for rescue?
No, not necessarily. Some guys like it the way it is. The rescue companies, some of them are very senior. Some of the guys come from a truck company to the rescue, so they don't necessarily have the background in special operations command. It's a funny thing. When I was in the squad company, I hated, sometimes they would call it the JV, and I hated that because sometimes I had more time on the job than the guy in the rescue company, and so you're like, no, I don't see it that way. But then when I got to the rescue company, then you see some of the younger guys in the squad company, then you see it differently again. So you see it both ways, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to that New York style breaking your balls type stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's not a company on the job that doesn't break someone's chops in another company. That's just the way it goes.
I love that, man. So you're at, I know they created 5 rescue companies for the 5 boroughs. Why did they strategically place 7 squads? And is there a particular area why they placed them where they did?
As far as I know, there's roughly about 2 to a borough.
Okay.
So if you think of every rescue, there's 1 in each borough. There's roughly 2 squads in each borough. So particularly like when I was in Queens, they split Queens pretty much north and south between 288 and 270.
Okay.
Now each squad also has a second and third, first, second, and third due squad area. So in other words, like squad 18 is in Manhattan. If they were tied up on something, we would get dispatched above 34th to Upper Manhattan. And then Squad 41, which was in the South Bronx, but right across the river from Harlem, they would cover back in, they would go that way. So each squad had a backup area also.
Can you explain what a borough is for people?
Borough is basically like a county. So
Okay.
Queens is Queens County, Brooklyn is Kings County. They all used to be, like, Brooklyn used to be a separate city. So my first firehouse was actually in Brooklyn, and it said Brooklyn Fire Department on the front of the building. It built in 1895. In 1898, they all merged to the FDNY.
Okay. Interesting.
So
it's
yeah,
fascinating to learn this stuff because it's different. FDNY is so different than all the other fire services around the country.
Yeah, so basically that's why the name is backwards compared to most fire departments too, because there was multiple fire departments. So they all culminated in the end of the fire department of the city of New York. That's why it's FDNY instead of NYFD.
Got it. Interesting, man.
Yeah, most
Well,
places you go, it's whatever town you're in, FD.
yep. Yep. Know that. That's what it is here. Or actually, now they're just doing DFD, like Dallas Fire Department. They
Yeah.
maybe have changed it since, but well, let's dig into Squad 288. That's where, that's the first thing I had heard about you as you were at Squad 288, and some pretty significant stuff happened during your time at Squad 288. So let's dig in before we get into 9/11. Just walk me through how long were you at Squad 288 before 9/11 happened, and what was your rank and what were you doing?
So, well, I was a firefighter there. I started there 99. I guess it was 99. I was a firefighter there as one of the younger guys. We had a bunch of young guys. The joke at the time was we were a bunch of small guys with glasses. Just interchange whoever face you want. Um, we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of young guys. The captain at the time took a lot of young guys. Kind of was a little criticized for it by his own peers, but he knew what he was doing. He was a very sharp individual. And he wanted some young guys that were hard chargers that he could train his way. And he did. And that's exactly what he got, was hard chargers that were trained the right way, the way he wanted them to do. And he had a lineage that was, impeccable. And he trained us all the right way. And, I have to tell you, too, starting a brand new company within a 150-year department, not exactly the easiest thing to do with no reputation. You've got to make your own reputation. So he was very big on that.
That's interesting. It's one of the things that I learned going to FDNY and going to multiple different places, multiple different firehouses, and just seeing there's a different culture at every single one of them. That it's just
And
it
deep
is
history.
huge, and it really is different at each
Now
location.
you can appreciate how difficult it is to start a brand new company with all the rest of that tradition and history, and you're in a company that doesn't have anything.
It's amazing, man. It was such a unique scenario. One of the things that I remember most about each firehouse is they have a specific wall, typically towards the front of the house, but
Correct.
regardless of where it's situated, it's the honored wall, right?
Yeah.
It has.
So every person that was killed in the line of duty, they put a plaque up 1 year to the day. Usually, 9/11, it didn't exactly happen that way because of the extenuating circumstances, but in the normal line of duty death, and I hate to even use the term normal, um, it's a year to the date
Got
that
it.
they have the plaque ceremony.
And I'm sure that wasn't there weren't big walls back before 9/11. So
No.
I obviously went there after, and most walls are filled. So
Yeah, and you got to see most of that on your tour around the city.
yeah. Yeah, it was a very eye-opening experience for anybody who gets the opportunity, has never been to Ground Zero. And it's not just about Ground Zero, going to honor our fallen, but also going to the firehouses to pay homage to those who continue the fight. Go learn about these men and women that passed or were murdered during 9/11. And just to really embrace yourself in a community and a culture that is so different. I mean, we always like to say that the military, special operations, and the fire service are a lot like each other because we eat together, we live together, we fight together. It's always, and we just break each other's balls all the time. Um, but two entirely different communities, but the same mission for America. So, Squad 288, you're on the job. You get a call. You're off duty the day of 9/11, right?
Yeah, so let me just go back to Father's Day in June, before September. Uh, the guys at 288 went to um, they went to a run, and they were out of their response area coming back um, from a hazardous materials run, and they get flagged down for a fire in a hardware store. So normally they would not have been the first engine there, but they just happened to be flagged down in the street by some civilians, and they ended up transmitting a fire in a hardware store. So they attacked the fire as normally. The captain who was working that day did not like the conditions at all. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but from what he said, and you got to remember, he's a 20+ year veteran of some very, very busy fire companies. So he's been there and done that. Very aggressive. And he did not like the conditions at all, kind of stopped the men from going down into the basement where the fire was because he just didn't like the conditions. With that said, there was an explosion. One of the walls blew out, killed 2 firemen, and one other fireman went into the basement and was actually the guy that I replaced at 288, Brian Fahey. And he, clear as a bell, was calling on the radio saying he's trapped, but he knows where he is. He's under the staircase. And they just couldn't get to him in time because of the intensity and whatnot of the fire. So it ended up being 3 line of duty deaths that day. The guys from 288 were on medical leave and pretty severely injured, captain included. Every once in a while on the anniversary, I'll send the captain a message to remind him that although it ended his career, he saved the lives of the rest of the company that day, which is a very tough thing to do as an aggressive firefighter, is to not go into the fire. Mm. But his experience told him what to do or what not to do. And that being said, those guys were on medical leave. So the way I explained to you how our chart works with the 1 through 25 numbers, those numbers were now 6 in a row on medical leave. So there was a big gap there. So what they did is they took me out of my normal number to put me into one of those gaps to fill in the blank. So there wasn't, in other words, 6 guys working one day and nobody the next. We kind of split it up a little bit. And that was the reason I was not working on 9/11. So the normal guys that I worked with most of the time were all killed on 9/11. So back to the thing. So on Father's Day, we lost 3 firefighters that day, and 2 at Rescue 4 and 1 at Ladder 163. So when Father's Day rolled around, when 9/11 rolled around, I was off that day. It was a Tuesday. I remember Monday Night Football was the night before. I woke up in the morning, got a phone call, said to turn on the TV, turned on the TV, and ended up going straight into the firehouse in Queens.
Squad 288, so they recalled everybody off duty, right?
Well, at 288, you could actually see the Twin Towers from the front of the firehouse. And one of the guys in hazmat actually went back. He was killed, actually went inside and told him that he just saw what happened. And hazmat, being that they were the citywide hazmat unit, they know they would be going. And 288 was pretty sure they were going. So, and that's exactly what ended up happening. They were gone before we even got to the firehouse.
Wow. So you show up to the firehouse. Walk us through that day.
We showed up to the firehouse. There's a handful of us there. We're putting gear together and whatnot and trying to get down, figuring out how to get to the trade center. And it was, as you can imagine, pretty chaotic day.
Well, I can imagine it's chaotic, but what was going on in your head? How were you feeling? Were you guys all just 100 miles an hour? Were you guys calm and collected? What was
a little bit of both, actually. Your training takes over, as it's kind of a cliche to say, but people say that it's out of the realm of normalcy at this point. But we want to know where our guys are, basically.
And when you got to the firehouse, were they actually already deployed? We're already at
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were already there.
But you don't realize at this point how catastrophic this truly is. You understand that planes went into the towers and that people were killed, but you don't have any clue that there's going to be a collapse of any kind.
No, that happened shortly, right after. And that was like, we're just trying to figure out where everybody is at that point. And we don't know which building they're in. We're trying to figure that all out.
Were you there at the firehouse or on location at some point before the collapse?
I was right about on the LIE, right near the firehouse. That's
the LIE?
The Long Island Expressway. The firehouse is on the service road of the expressway.
Okay.
I was right about there.
You were making your way to the firehouse when
Correct.
the collapse happened.
Yeah.
Of both or the second tower or the first one?
I'm pretty sure it was both.
Okay. So at that point, everything shifts from going in to do this, massive search and rescue.
Yeah, to figuring out where our guys are.
So walk us through that, man. Like, what does that look like?
So we all went down to the trade center. Obviously you don't get too close to the place because it's pandemonium. It's just a dust cloud. We're trying to all stick together. We're trying to figure out, where we run into firemen down there that were there, that survived, or who was where. And it was just surreal. The whole size of the magnitude of the thing was just block after block after block. It was just, the ironic thing is I worked in the hazmat unit less than a week before that, and we were at the trade center for a Freon week. So I, was just there less than like 5 days beforehand. It was just crazy.
What were you feeling inside your gut when you get down there?
Yeah, I don't even know how to describe it because it's nothing that like I've ever seen before. And I without being too graphic, I remember seeing this ambulance flipped over with just a pair of legs sticking out from under it, and people were trying to get this person out, and obviously the person wasn't alive. And at that point, it was kind of like almost like you would see in a war movie, like. You hate to say it, but forget the dead people. We got to look for the live people.
Yeah.
As terrible as that seems, because we're used to doing rescues with live people.
Right. Yeah, but it's it. I don't even know how to describe the word.
Yeah.
This is different circumstances where all of your brothers are involved.
Yeah. And you got the whole world watching it. Like I've never been in a thing that was, everybody was watching, but not only everybody, the whole world.
Right.
It wasn't New York is watching. It wasn't the country is watching. It was the whole world was watching. And, at that point we were just, formulating a plan to get some guys together. We had some equipment. We're trying to get more. We got back to the stuff that we carry on the rig. We carry urban search and rescue stuff. So we were getting fluorescent orange paint that we carry, and the markers that you break, that light up and stuff like that. You got to remember, everything's in a cloud right now. Things are burning. Things are on fire. Dust is everywhere. People are cleaning their eyes out with water bottles just so you
How
can
long
see.
did you not have visibility?
Well, the visibility just gradually got better. But I remember, we stopped at one point. Somebody handed me a bottle of water, and I was cleaning my face off with it because you couldn't, your eyes were caked. I can't imagine if you were actually there in the collapse and survived.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to actually get into work, not to the job, but actually to the location and start working?
I don't even remember.
No. So you just got in there, you made your way forward until you actually got to a location, and you started working.
Yeah, and then we had like a groups of guys in special ops. We put together like a little task force and stuff. And I remember one of the officers saying like, "Come with me. We're gonna go." And we ended up in the middle of that chaotic scene, like going down these steel I-beams, and we were marking bodies if you found any, so that people would find them later on. But I remember sliding down these I-beams, and we're going like under where the rubble is now, and we got somewhat down, and there was like a bar that used to be in the, I guess, in one of the lower levels. It was like half on one level and half on another level. And I remember like at one point we slid down and we got to the parking garages, which are underground, and they were on an incline from being collapsed and whatnot, and sliding down the parking garage. And after, I think it was about 45 minutes to an hour of climbing down, maybe, we ended up down where the train tracks were underneath everything. Water was pouring down, and I don't even remember if this was the next day or that day, or I just remember turning my buddy Matt that I worked with, and we're like, where are all the people? We were finding bodies, but we didn't find like hundreds or thousands of bodies like we figured. There's 50,000 people that work there.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget it, where we're at the train tracks and there's a platform and I see this door. We opened the door and it was like a little break room for the people that worked for the railroad. And it was like a little kitchenette and a microwave and a coffee maker. And I swear, if you opened that door and found somebody in there, they wouldn't have no idea what just took place above them. And it was the really surreal moment of the whole thing. Like, wow.
My gosh. So you got to the pile and you were working on it. How long did you stay there before you got a break?
I remember we went back what ended up being where the tool cache would be for the rest of the operation. We went in there in the financial district, took a break in gather up some guys and all that. Kind of found if there was a refrigerator for anything to eat, because nobody had eaten anything. And I remember my cell phone for some reason was working and a lot of people's weren't. So I had to give one of the guys I went to the academy with, his father was a bigwig on the fire department, and his father was killed. And I remember him looking at me like, John, your phone work? And I'm like, yeah, you need it? He's like, yeah, I have to call home and tell him my father was killed. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, man, gut punch.
Unbelievable.
So the stupidest thing at that point, you're looking like for any, we had these portable light towers, like you see during construction on the highways and stuff. We had a few of them in Special Operations Command. And it's like, we got one light tower up and it was like, we're like high-fiving each other, like, yeah, we got a light tower up. And meanwhile, we're going to be there for 8 months. Like, you didn't put it in perspective at the time, you're just taking one little victory at a time, if you can consider anything a victory.
Yeah.
But
Ray Downey Jr. was running the operation from the start, right?
Ray Downey was with the chief of department. Chief Gansey was killed. Ray Downey was killed. There's a multitude. The person that I was talking about was Assistant Commissioner Feehan, who was the chief of department before that and retired and became the first assistant commissioner. Just horrendous. The amount of knowledge and the years
no
of
matter
experience.
how much knowledge there was, though, I mean, this is something that nobody's ever seen before.
No, it's a terrorist attack. But I will tell you that when I joined the squad company and the Special Operations Command, it was training for when something happens, not if something happens.
Yeah.
There was not a never an if. It was always a when. And it was always brought into your mind about a second attack.
Every single day was the same, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it was Groundhog Day for 8 months. The only thing that kept it going was once it was shut down for rescue, the only thing that kept it going was giving somebody hope that something of DNA would be recovered.
Wow. 343 firemen were killed on 9/11.
300, and one was the 344th was a fire patrolman. The fire patrol is not in existence anymore. They were paid by insurance companies to go in and salvage commercial structures as much as they could. But they operated in the sense of the FDNY. A lot of them actually became FDNY members that were in fire patrol first. So,
really touching these subjects. And I know that it doesn't matter how much time you get away from 9/11, it's still going to be just like you were there yesterday, and very emotional to talk about. How do you guys, you guys were able to recover some firefighters from Squad 288? Were you able to recover firefighters from other groups?
I don't want to go too much into specifics, but I will tell you that December 11th, after we had a funeral for Jonathan ILP, we found his body. So we did another funeral. Only a friend of yours can make you bury him twice. That's the ultimate gag in the FDNY, I guess.
You shared this story with me about Lee ILP and his son.
Yeah, Lee never left Ground Zero. He was a fixture there. Brendan, who was, still a probationary firefighter at that point. He was a new guy. We got to call the volunteer fire department that I was part of had given us a van to use for my company, Ford Squad 288. They just said, take the van and bring it back when you're done. So we had the van for a few months. So I got home from Ground Zero, had the van at my house. The phone rang in the middle of the night that they found his body. So I called Lee, who happened to be home, and Brendan happened to be at his house. Brendan was not living there at the time, had already moved out, but couldn't sleep that day, and for some reason was at the house. And I'll never, because Lee was like, John, why are you calling me at like 2:30 in the morning? And then he's like, never mind, I know why you would be calling me at 2:30 in the morning. And I was like, don't move, I'll be right there. So I went to the house, picked up him and Brendan, and we drove down there. And it was this most surreal moment. I use that word a lot because I don't know how else to describe it, but everything was shut down. There was no noise going on, and I can't say. I don't know how it is now. I'm a father. I wasn't a father then, and I am a father now, and I don't know how I would take it. I don't know if Lee was happy that we found the body, because a lot of people didn't. There was only, it's been so long now. I'm trying to remember 175 like complete bodies out of 3,000.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Yeah.
And he was one of them. There was a Joe Hunter, who I was also good friends with, who was killed on 9/11. I knew him, like Jonathan, way before we got on the FDNY, so I've been friends with him for a long time. And his mother told us she had a dream that Joe came to her and said that you're not going to find him, but he's good. He's okay. Next day we found his helmet.
Wow.
Not him.
Wow.
So there's a million stories like that. This is just particularly mine, or 288's, but yeah, it's, I didn't talk about things for a long time, but and me and you kind of talked about this before, like when we saw the Pearl Harbor guys kind of dying off, and there's nobody left to tell the story. Like, we got a whole new generation of people in this country that are adults now that were kids, were not born.
Right.
We need to tell the story. Kids are old enough to vote and drink now that weren't even born yet.
Right.
So if we let the stories die, then you do forget. And the motto is never forget.
Right. I took a trip, maybe it was 9 years ago now, to New York with you, and it was my first time there. And of course we walked everywhere. I mean, we went to firehouse after firehouse, and we went to Ground Zero, and we went on the boat and got to see the Statue of Liberty and did all the normal tourist things, but then really dove deep into your culture and your background.
Yeah.
And I remember you taking us over to that tribute, that memorial center that Lee ILP had created and ran, and he walked us through a personal tour where he explained all this stuff, to which he had his son's bunker gear in a shadow box there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was so hard for me to see because it relates so much to my background in service.
Yeah.
And at the SEAL teams, they have specific shadow boxes with kits of some of our teammates that have been killed in combat.
It's kind of a weird thing that you even have to have that. It's like, we like to have celebrations when the guy's retiring, pat him on the back, tell him we're going to miss old, what's your name? Because we forgot about you already. But to have things, plaques and shadow boxes, because it is somewhat of a normalcy to die in the line of duty. But the thing about being in special operations, to me, you ask every single person right to their face, they do it all again tomorrow.
There's no question. There's no question.
If there's a question of somebody's alive in there, we're going in. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And people can say what they want, but nobody that I know of in the military or in the fire service has ever looked at the person they're going to save and said, oh, I wonder if they're transgender. I wonder if color they are. I wonder what their religion is. I wonder who cares?
Right.
If they have a pulse, we're saving them. If they don't have a pulse, we're still saving the body.
Yep.
And the one thing is, our own, we go home with. One way or the other, we're going home with them.
Well, you consistently honor your brothers. I know you have pictures on the wall, and you have a list of all your teammates. And I know since I've known you, you have consistently honored your brothers and shared their names. You worked on the wreck on 9/11 for how long? 8 months?
Yeah.
At the end, what was the closing out of that like?
It wasn't good because towards the end, the city wanted to shut it down. The firemen didn't want to leave. They were threatening people with arrests. Like, this just should not be that way.
Yeah,
You shouldn't be threatening to be arrested because you want to take home somebody's remains.
You're kidding.
No, that's just the way it was,
Wow.
That left a bad taste in everybody's mouth.
It should. Yeah. You get done, and you basically told me that you went back to normal business. Well, how the hell you go back to normal business?
Yeah, like the military, you have to have strong leadership. And the leadership doesn't necessarily mean a lieutenant or a captain. I mean, it can be, but doesn't necessarily mean that. We had a senior guy named Hank. Hank was a veteran of Rescue 1 for many years, was a senior guy there. Captain asked him to come to 288 when it started to be the senior guy there. So Hank did. Hank would be what you call like your sergeant major that's been there and done that. And I'll never forget it because the day we brought the rig back to the firehouse and we're cleaning it out with a hose line, not a garden hose. We're cleaning the inside of the fire truck with a fire hose. That's how bad it was. And Hank looked at all of us and said, all right, the crying is over. It's time to get back to work. Wow. That's all he needed to say.
Wow.
And he led by example, which is the great ones do. So we had to recruit new members because we don't get people from probationary school. So we had to recruit new members, which is hard. And I would not want to be one of those new members trying to come in to replace somebody that we're memorializing and they're trying to replace.
Right.
And to their credit, they did not try to replace anybody. They tried to be themselves. But you know what I'm saying. Like,
I want to share one thing for context for people listening, that because there's a lot that I'm sure don't know, but Squad 288 lost 19 members that day on 9/11. Is that correct?
The firehouse did, yeah.
Yeah.
Between the squad and the hazmat.
And that was the most single-handed loss of life in the fire service up to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then, we've had a few other things too. We lost one to suicide, one of the new guys that came there.
It's so hard to hear this because, it's like just now the military and fire service and police are talking about suicide and all this stuff, but people don't realize this has been going on for generations and it's been a systemic problem for so long.
I'm going to tell you something that the FDNY did figure out. And Gary, his name was Gary Salentani, the kid that killed himself. And I say that because I've spoken to his family, And they've asked me to share his story so that he's not forgotten. Gary was the big, call him the little fat kid, but I hate to use the word fat because he wasn't fat. He was just, let's say, robust.
Husky.
Yeah. And the fire service knew that we were going to have a problem because of the large loss of life. So they assigned a counselor to the firehouse. He's there every day. Hey, John, how you doing? Good. I got to check the rig. Hey, Bird, how you doing? Good. I got to go, whatever. Everybody's got something to do. We're on mission reconstruct here. Nice guy. Some people opened up to him. Some people didn't. I'm teaching a class at the volunteer house. Hey, John, you got to take this call. I'm like, I'm in the middle of teaching a class still. I got like 50 students in the room. Now the work is calling. I'm like, how did work know I was here? So I get on the phone, and that's when they told me that Gary had passed away. So I drop what I'm doing. I'm getting married at this point. I'm supposed to be going out to dinner with the guys for a bachelor party this night. I end up leaving the class, going to the firehouse at 288, meeting all the guys. We're talking. The counselor is distraught because he feel like he failed. And he didn't fail at all. What failed is he wasn't one of us.
Yeah.
He was a counselor, but he wasn't a peer. And then what did work is, in the kind of a long story, but we had a lot of guys that had to retire because they made, we talked about this previously about how your pension works and all that. Well, they made enough money that if they went back to work, they'd lose money. So guys retired early because the numbers were there. But it's hard to spend your whole life doing something and then readjust being out of it.
Yeah.
So now you got guys that are retired, that got nothing to do, and their head's still spinning and just went through 9/11 and everything else. And you got all these guys that are in the firehouse, got nobody to talk to. So somebody got the idea of teaching these older guys that are retired, they were not, let's teach them how to be peer counselors, and they can talk because they get it. And it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's still going to this day. That was one really good thing to come out of this, if I can say there is a good thing to come out of it. And Gary's death, not in vain. And like I said, I like to, share it sometimes with everybody because it shouldn't be in vain.
Absolutely. Well, when you quit echoing their name, they're forgotten. So you gotta
and
their story.
and maybe it took a tragedy, but something good actually came out of it, where we have peer counseling for even guys that are on the fire department now that have been on for 25 years that weren't on 9/11.
Yeah.
And they're now the old guys. It's like the military, man. It's a young man's job.
It is. Well, you got back to the job. About how long after you got back to some type of normalcy did you transition to Rescue One?
2005, I went to Rescue One. I had some friends there, and it's just a natural progression as you get older. And for me, I didn't like being comfortable. When you're the new guy, you're never comfortable because you're always in the sink, you're always training, you're always doing something. When you think you're the old guy, you get comfortable, and I don't want to be that guy. And I didn't have enough time on the job to be that guy. I became that guy by default, and I wasn't comfortable with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is an interesting place, though, right? Because you're joining the Elite Rescue One, so you're a new guy again. However, you all are now seasoned firefighters.
Yeah. Everybody has to be a seasoned firefighter to be there.
Yeah.
Some of them are new at the special operations stuff. Some of them are not. Diving was a new thing for me. They teach us how to be a tender for the divers and stuff like that, but I never did diving until I got to the rescue.
Yeah. Yeah, but it seems like during 9/11, though, everybody was doing technical rescue, right?
Yeah, whatever you were capable of, yeah.
Yeah. So what's it like being at Rescue One? I mean, obviously I got to go with you and walk in, and I was like, so this is the place that stole the Navy SEAL Trident and uses it as their logo. Talk to me about what Rescue One was like entering in and now officially being part of it.
Well, first of all, the history and the name and everything that comes with it is kind of overwhelming. And you're just trying to fit in. You're just trying to not make a bad name for yourself and just fit in and go under the radar if you can. Not exactly easy because everybody sticks out like a sore thumb, but thankfully some of the guys knew me already. The captain I didn't really know, but he took me anyway. I went in wanting to be taught again.
Yeah.
So
and
that's
you joined Rescue One, and you were a new guy. How long were you on the job before the accident happened?
year and a half, maybe.
Yeah. Wow.
So
how far was Squad 288 away from Rescue One?
well, we went into Midtown a lot. So if you go probably about 4 or 5 miles to get through the Midtown Tunnel, and then you just have to go across Manhattan.
Okay.
You come in on the east side, and Rescue One's on the west side. So you come in on like 34th, and Rescue One's on 42nd, on 43rd Street on the west side.
A whole new territory now for you.
Yeah, but we went into Manhattan a lot in 288, so it wasn't unfamiliar.
Okay. Well, that's nice. Well, I don't want to dive into this fully because I know that this is also another very tough subject, maybe your hardest to talk about, but I do want to touch on it because the interesting thing about the fire service is it seems like you can work for 150 years in the fire service and they just never kick you out. Whereas you only have a shelf life in the service, in the military, before they're like, beat it, pal. Your hips are falling apart, your knees are falling apart, get out.
Yeah.
So, and I know that you would have been a firefighter, active firefighter for still to this day. What happened that particular day? What do you want to share about it that retired you from your career?
Well, we went to, usually when I worked with the particular guys I worked with at Rescue One, we usually didn't cook. So we usually would get takeout every day. So that would depend on what's going on and when you ate. But we usually went to around 71st and Columbus in Manhattan because within 100 yards you can get any kind of food you wanted. So long story short, working at night, we went to a couple of different runs. We had a guy run over by a train. We had a gas leak. A couple of different. The guy lived being run over by the train. Ironically, myself and Mike Shunk, that was hurt, were on the paper the next day for helping save this guy while we were both in the hospital almost dead by the time the paper came out.
For a completely different scenario.
For a completely different scenario, yeah. So we went about 10:30 at night to, like I said, 71st in Columbus. Mike and I went to a burger place. Some other guys went to a burrito place that we parked out front of. It's July, so it's hotter than hell. The rescue company, you ride in the back of the rig, not in a cab part. So it's pretty hot. And our food was done first. So we went back to the rig, put the food in the rig, and got back out of the rig because it's too hot. Standing on the sidewalk in front of the burrito place. And we had a guy riding with us, which routinely happened back then, who was one of the dispatchers. So we couldn't hear what he was saying because you could picture Manhattan with all the noise and everything else. So we thought something was coming in on the radio, like something for us to respond to. Because in the rescue and the squad, typically you listen to the radio. So if you hear something, you can get a jump on it because you're covering a large quantity of the city where you need to get you need to travel to get to the fire. Or emergency. So we walked over to the rig to hear what he was saying. And as soon as we walked over to the rig, a cab changed lanes and crashed right into the back of the rig pinning myself and Mike between the cab and the rig. So
you had no time to react. You didn't even see it.
no, I heard the crash before I felt the pain.
Wow.
And then I was like, oh, I'm stuck. And then I had like I was on fire. And I've been in the burn center before, so I've been burned. This was, on fire. The cab crashed at, they estimated about 45 miles an hour. They had to actually, the cab was in, the whole front of the cab was smashed, so the engine blew and everything else. They had to start the fire truck up to pull the fire truck up to get me out and Mike out.
Were you coherent the whole time?
Yeah.
And Mike?
Yeah, until they, a cop had been across the street and he screamed on the radio 1013, which is what their code is for like, the you know what's hitting the fan, we need assistance like yesterday. So that sends the cavalry.
So when they pulled the rig forward.
No, there's no head trauma or anything. So I was, pretty much from the waist up, I was fine.
Yeah. But when did you notice that you were, what your injuries were?
Well, when they pulled the rig up, I fell just right over, like, boom.
Yeah.
And I had no feeling.
No feeling.
But other than the burning, I couldn't tell if I had a leg, not had a leg. I couldn't tell any of that. Just that I was on fire.
And at that point, you had both legs?
Yeah. So pretty much I had my bunker pants on and whatnot. So I then I guess when the medics got there, they have a at the time was fairly new, specialized medics that specialize in crushing injuries. Or sometimes you get the people in between the platform and the train where they get crushed and stuff like that. So they were a fairly new thing and pretty much saved my life.
Yeah. Were you bleeding out?
Oh yeah.
What was the extent of your injuries and Mike's injuries at that time?
So my left leg was a compound tib fib, pretty extensive. My right leg was much more extensive than that. Was the compound tib fib. Mike's was one leg was the tib fib in his leg, so it was both lower, about bumper height to the car.
I've seen the picture of the cab, and it's not even fathomable that you guys lived through that.
Yeah, it's not. I remember then waking up in the hospital and them telling me about the whole leg situation, and I was in surgery for I think roughly about 18 hours. I was in surgery when I went to the hospital. And then I spent a few months at Bellevue Hospital.
What were the surgeries working on?
Originally, they took all veins out of my left leg to try to put in my right leg to save the leg with the circulation and stuff. And that ended up not working.
Okay. So they amputated a leg above the knee.
Yeah. So pretty much if I didn't do that, I wouldn't be here because the infection would have killed me.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it came to, we're going to save him or his leg because he's going to die with the leg on.
You got that news that they had to amputate. I mean, what was your first thought?
Well, you have to remember also, I was kind of drugged up at the time, but I was like, they talked to me about, we'll get a prosthetic and these things do amazing things nowadays and you'll be up and running. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's go get one.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, not exactly. Your other leg's a little screwed up right now. I had these external fixator on the other leg. I'm sure you know what that is with the pins and everything else. So
yep.
You have a fracture like this and they pin it above and below the brake because if they put a rod through it, that would become a highway for infection to travel, which is exactly what happened to my right leg. So they did not want that to happen to my left leg. So I had that. So I couldn't stand on my left leg either. came pretty close to being a below knee amputee on my left and an above knee amputee on my right.
What was the rehab like? How long?
I feel like rehab's still going.
That's a good point.
In 2010, I moved to Myrtle Beach, and I was still at that point taking the shopping cart with the electric thing with the cart attached to it because I couldn't walk through the supermarket.
So this retired you from FDNY?
Retired in 2008. 2010, still couldn't walk through the supermarket.
Wow.
Now, it was a year to the date that I had the external fixator on and was back in the hospital in 1 year to get a rod put in my left leg. So I couldn't even learn how to walk until I got the external fixator off and put the rod in my left leg. But I will tell you, when I was hurt, I was the first assistant chief of the Port Washington Fire Department. In March, I became chief of department. And I was hurt in July. In October, I was back in my chief's car.
Yeah.
Being driven around.
I know. That's one of the most special things about the story is that you got back up on your feet.
Well, I told you before that I might go to New York. My buddy's being sworn in as chief there. His father, who passed away a couple years ago, came to my house every morning with a bacon and egg sandwich and would pick me up. He was retired. He was a police officer that retired, but been in the volunteer fire department 45 years at that point, maybe. His father would come and pick me up and drive me around all day. So it was Bobby Reese was his name, and we called him Bobby Bacon because he brought me the bacon and egg sandwich every morning. Which my dog at the time loved it because I had a dog at the time named Gunny Highway.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I wanted to name him Clint, but I was like, it sounds too girly, so I'm going to name him Gunny Highway.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bobby used to drive him around every day in the chief's car, and his son in March is going to be sworn in as chief. So that's a really cool deal to me personally.
That's amazing. And it's amazing to show the fortitude that you got back into the hot seat and you started to do the job again. Because the unfortunate thing is when you get forced retired out of anything, military, first responder scenario, that's a huge void. It's hard enough just to get out after retirement or just to leave on your own circumstances.
Yeah, I was just going to say on your own circumstances is a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. But
although when you consider what I went through with 9/11 and everything, I mean, how do you complain about it? Really? Like,
I don't know, Johnny. I could find a million ways to complain. I'm typically a complainer, so. But
yeah,
you're a different breed, man.
I'll share with you a small story. When me and you went to Washington, and we got off the plane and went straight to Arlington. Right? So we go to Arlington Cemetery, and guys like us, where's the first place we're going to? Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, right?
That's right.
And I remember because you turned to me and said, wow, it's pretty far on the map. It's a pretty far walk. Are you sure you're going to be able to get there? Because the terrain, the terrain is kind of like up and down and up and down. And I looked at you and said, there's a time and a place to complain. Going to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is not one of them.
Yeah.
I said, tomorrow I will cry like a baby, but not today.
I remember that. And I'll finish on this story with that story. And this was hilarious. So we got that option, that trip to go to the White House.
Yeah.
And, it was really cool. It was Johnny, myself, and another one of our brothers, Greg Turnell, who is a career 30-year plus DC firefighter and a great human being. And so the three of us were going to go to the White House to go snoop around. We got access. So we walk in and we got to see everything, got to look at the Oval Office and just walk through and get a kind of guided tour. And I remember that guy came to us and he's like, hey, at this time it was Obama and Biden.
Yeah.
So we're like, hey, Biden's in whatever. He's in the whatever room. And he's like, he wants to meet you guys. And we're like, uh-huh. And he's like, well, let's go to his office and wait. And we're like, we got to go eat food. Like, we're getting hungry here.
Yeah.
like, you gotta meet him. We're like, no, we're good. So we were sitting in his office, and we ended up switching out one of his challenge coins for a Sons of the
Sons
Flag
of the
coin.
Flag coin, yeah.
And then that aide, or whoever that person that was his right hand, gave us this giant challenge coin with Biden's head all over it. And when we left, we ended up getting out of there, getting out, and then going to eat right away. And when we left eating that place,
It was Mexican, I think, right?
yeah, we gave the coins to the waitress, put it in the sleeve with the tip, and she thought that Biden was there and didn't even know it. So funny. So it was good times, man. That was an amazing trip for sure.
That was pretty cool when I told the guy that was Biden's chief of staff, like, let me put my feet up on his desk. And he's like, yeah, no. Can't let you put your feet up on his desk.
Yeah, that was incredible. Well, I didn't, I'd met you obviously after all of these circumstances. And, one thing I want to touch on real quick is like, how did you keep yourself mentally strong, man? You've gone through more than anybody that I know. How have you kept yourself strong just to make it through it? Because, again, you've been through one of the largest events in the history of America. We all lose teammates, and it's hard to ever get over that. I don't think we ever do. What have you done to keep yourself going?
Well, first off, nothing of what we ever do is by yourself.
Yeah.
We have multitude of people that were peers, even somebody like yourself, fire service, military, it's kind of all cross-pollinates. Either you're beat up mentally or you're not. And the beat up mentally people, we rely on each other. But I would say first and foremost, for me personally, it started just growing up. My parents were strong. My dad was very strong. Instill the right things into you. Always have to do the right thing. Even when nobody's looking, that was the Ray Pfeiffer thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I tried to do. And you have two choices: either deal with things or don't deal with things. And if you don't deal with things, they snowball until you have a mess on your hands.
Yeah.
And you can do everything perfect and head things on straight on and still have problems, which we all do. But if I was who I am now, maybe I might have been able to help that Gary Salentani. Maybe I might have been able to help somebody that listens to this podcast think like, oh, holy crap, he went through that. I could go through what I'm going through.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to realize that you can actually help save lives without being on a fire truck. And it sounds easy, but it's not. Me personally, I had to move away. I could not stay where I was and be around the firehouse and all the guys all the time and watch the fire truck go out the door.
Yeah.
That's
Same.
I can't do it. I moved to Myrtle Beach because I needed to turn the page. I don't know what the next chapter is or what it would be, but it couldn't be what it was, so I needed a new chapter. Because the old chapter, I would be in mentally, it would be problematic.
Yeah. When I met you, I was drinking pretty hard, and I didn't really realize that it was any kind of an issue. I wasn't hurting anybody but myself. But, when I got sober, I used you as a massive example. And you don't really know that you've done as much for me as you have, because I would look at it and say, like, it's not getting sober that was hard for me. It was dealing with my shit afterwards and figuring out what was really driving the cause. And I would look at your story and say, man, like, here I am complaining, and people have had it a lot worse, and Johnny's had it a lot worse. And I've used that as an example to keep me on the straight and narrow.
As you know well enough to know, most people that have a dependency problem, it's some kind of co-occurring problem. It's not just the dependency. There's a reason for the dependency, or there's a multitude of reasons. I don't want to get too much into that, but
Yeah.
the more that you can have a peer for a support team, the better.
Yep. That's right.
I decide, like right now, I don't drink because I don't want to. I didn't need to wake up every day and have a drink because that's just me personally. I don't need that.
Yeah.
I like the taste of it. Do you drink too much? Yeah, I guess everybody does, at some point, but I never had a dependency problem like where I needed it. You know what I mean? I like having the clear head, and
Yeah.
I'm old too, so I don't like being recovering in the morning.
Yeah.
Life to me is hard enough as it is. Some people go to meetings. Some people do whatever works for you. That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
I had this conversation with somebody yesterday about the meetings, and I said, I went to Chicago, and Dan taught me. I went to every kind of meeting there is to learn about these meetings, and they're all a 12-step program. But for me, and this is just me speaking, I couldn't take the guy up on the soapbox at every meeting.
Yeah.
That's not my background to be up there saying I just can't do that. And it just rubbed me the wrong way, and the meetings rubbed me the wrong way. But if that's what you need to get through the next day, then so be it. Some people use the thing like, I got another drink in me, but I don't have another sobriety in me.
Yeah.
Whatever the case is, I want to be here. I want to be here for my kids. I go to the basketball games. I go, I'm here for my wife and her kids, and whatever I can take, and I missed out on years with working so much that I don't know how I'd be a family man if I was still working.
Yeah.
I retired with no kids. Now I got 9.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm only responsible for 2, but I adopted 3, and I got 4 stepkids, and I got a granddaughter who's my freaking boss.
Yep. Yep.
And she was here the other day, man. I left, and I was like, I need a nap.
Oh, well, I have young kids, so I know exactly what it means.
Yeah, she's 6.
Yeah, it's right in between mine. It's amazing, man. Well, I met you after all of this in around 2011 when we were forming up Sons of the Flag. And we just had our CEO, Johnny Yellick, on to talk about Sons of the Flag and the mission and where we're taking it. But we met around that time because my dear friend, your dear friend, Nathan Pilcher, firefighter in Dallas, said, if we're going to do this, we got to get Johnny Walters involved. And that's how I learned about you. It wasn't very long after that you were quick to jump in and help us and look at this objectively. So being one of the founding members of Sons of the Flag, it was a really cool calling for all of us because you weren't working in the job that you loved. I was not working in the job that I loved. We were all searching for some meaning and purpose, and we could start to dive in and sink our teeth into something to help others. And you actually had a stint in the burn unit, so you knew a lot more than I did about this. So what was it like when you got the call about Sons? What was your initial reactions?
Well, me, like I can't do things unless I do it 100%, which I have to learn to taper that a little bit as I get older. Kind of like you.
Exactly.
Like,
you're 100 miles an hour.
Let's not just skydive. Let's jump off a building and you get 42 people to skydive with us.
Yeah. Indeed.
So yeah, it's great to have a purpose, and at the end of the day, we're helping people.
Yeah.
That's what it's, all about. We have a brotherhood of people, and we're helping people.
Yep. Well, we would not have grown though. I hate Nathan, even though he is one of our best friends. I hate him because he's good looking. He's a fireman, a cowboy. He's a skateboarder. It's a weird anomaly of things that he is. But the greatest thing that he could have ever done was to introduce us, because Sons of the Flag was a mom and pop shop charity in its infancy. And the reason that it started to open up is because of the fire service, which you had a massive hand in putting that together.
Well, one of the things, it's not me, but when you have the background on being able to work at Rescue Company 1, people don't have to know me, but they know that brand everywhere in the fire service.
Yeah.
So it brings instant credibility, which is why when we go to, like I said, when I went to Rescue 1, you just try and fit in and not screw it up.
Yeah, for sure.
You're just trying to, make every day as best you can.
But to your point, when you said like that name has this meaning, I mean, you're 100% right. The same thing with the SEAL teams. When we did our first fire trade show, which was the largest FDIC, we had Rescue 1, Rescue 2.
Yeah.
We had the USAR companies from Texas there. I mean, we had pretty notable people in our booth. Pretty sure Greg Turnell, yeah. So DC Rescue Company as well.
So Greg is a perfect example. So when I talk to you about Hank, the senior guy, we have on our fire helmet, we have the front piece with the one that I put that you have on your desk.
The shield?
Yeah. Right. So that's called a front piece on our helmet. It has our badge number and our unit number. And he was very, very big to instill in you that you make the front piece. That front piece does not make you.
Interesting.
So in other words, like you could be a SEAL sniper, but you're not who you are because you were a SEAL sniper. You made the SEAL snipers who they are by being you.
Interesting.
So don't screw it up.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Heard that a lot.
No pressure.
Heard that a lot.
But yeah, you make, the company's not going to make me. I got to make the company better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that comes with a lot of credibility. And it could be both good and bad if you screw it up.
It is amazing when we were going down this journey, though, because we didn't realize what we were building here. We were just trying to move the mission forward. Didn't realize how massive, how impactful we could be, how much of a need it truly was, how underfunded and served it was.
Yeah.
And I remember, I was yearning for a mission. And when we got this going and the team started forming up, it was like, wow, I feel so honored and blessed to be a part of this. And this is exactly what I needed in life. And I remember you and your dad were in town, and we just done the Legacy Skydive for 2012. And I remember your dad in my office saying, I'm so grateful that you've given this opportunity to my son. And he started to cry.
Yeah.
And I was like, here I am trying to figure myself out in my own journey. And I'm now realizing that other people are attached to this as emotionally and as much as I am. And that gave me all the firepower to want to explode this thing. But I could not have done that without you.
Well, it's interesting that you say about like the parents, because I distinctly remember when you were still working at your other job.
Yeah.
And started Sons of the Flag. And I remember being in the car with you when you were talking to your mom, and she was saying, maybe you should leave there and just go out on your own full time. And maybe this is your calling and this is what you need. And
yeah,
yeah. I mean, I know your mom and dad are are not together, but they still made you, and you still get influence from both sides.
Oh yeah. Oh,
and she said to you at that time, like, hey,
yep,
maybe this is your calling. And, I think she was kind of nudging you to go in that way.
Yeah, a lot of people did. And that ultimately didn't take too long for that to happen, and was be ultimately grateful for that. We have done some crazy stuff with Sons of the Flag. It's just not your typical charity where it's like, okay, we're just going to do a little gala here and there, and we're going to raise some money and help some people. And we have done some crazy events, extreme sports outings, gotten in lots of private trouble. I mean, fought with alcohol. I mean, all kinds of fun stuff. The Legacy Skydive to me was so special because it was our first event for Sons of the Flag.
Yeah.
It was private. It was, let's see who we can get to come to this. Nobody knows who we are. And we're going to do something that has never been done before, and it's going to be hard. And I look back on how difficult that was then and what we're performing these days. And I'm like, my gosh, thank God for evolution. of, events and growth, because that was a nightmare. But the idea, for everybody who doesn't know, is Legacy Skydive. An idea that I was sitting around with years before we started Sons of the Flag is, how do we jump veterans together? And then it ultimately became, we got to do something to come out of the gates as our first charity event. Let's do what we call Legacy Skydive, which would be jumping a veteran from every single war that is living. So World War II to present day. But Sons of the Flag doesn't just serve veterans, it serves first responders. And so let's bring in a brother from 9/11 to actually jump. And there was so many exciting things about this. I mean, I'm talking to the Golden Knights who came in for it.
Yeah.
Active duty team. And I'm like, hey, you going to be able to jump Johnny? Is his leg going to turn into a torpedo? Is it going to fly off? Is it going to turn into like some floating thing that's going to make you guys spin and pendulum and do potato chipping and all this stuff? And we're like, we're going to handle it. And, I mean, I can't believe it. 2012, we pulled it off and got no news coverage whatsoever. Kind of didn't really generate much revenue, but we ended up jumping a veteran from every single war and you from 9/11.
That was still pretty badass. And I'll tell you, I still like Mark Colombo from the Cowboys came.
Yeah.
I still talk to him on social media. Greg Windmiller.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, from the Golden Knights.
Yeah, I mean, like, still got some connections, and this is a while now.
Yep. Pete Bielskis, our World War II vet, jumped, and his favorite part of that whole scenario was hanging out with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
My dad's too.
This is so awesome. That was an amazing, amazing event because we did it.
Hey, my son was there, and he was in a stroller, and he's in high school now.
That's crazy, man. That is crazy. And then we did it again the next year because it was like, we need to get this thing to be seen. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be better. Yeah. And we nailed it. And that was so exciting. And that was the impetus to writing the book, Sons of the Flag.
Yeah. That was a pretty cool experience on its own right.
For you?
For the whole thing. We got to see pictures of Kiss.
Oh, yeah.
I learned about Soup and Sandwich.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Best nickname live. We wrote a book. And for those of you who don't know, we have a book out that supports our cause, Sons of the Flag. And the book is titled Sons of the Flag, Real Accounts from the Last 100 Years of Service. And Johnny's got a chapter in there talking about his life, FDNY, 9/11, and furthermore into Sons of the Flag. So if you have interest in learning more on paper, you go check out Sons of the Flag on Amazon and scoop up a copy, and you get to learn more about Johnny. Proceeds do go to our cause, Sons of the Flag. And this led us down a path to where we could actually go and do this bigger, better, badder.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, when you first said to me, when we first started, like, and you said, I'm going to do an event. Are you in or you out? And I distinctly remember it because I think we were drinking wine then that night, which I don't even think you drank, but you were drinking it that night.
Yeah.
And then you said, are you in or you out? And I was like, damn, I said 3 times I'm in. And then you were like, oh, good, because we're skydiving. And I'm like, you could have said that before we started with the wine.
Yeah, forget about that.
Which led to 2 more jumps after that jump.
Oh, yeah. The reason that we've done the Legacy Skydive 3 times is obviously the first time it just didn't get any visibility. And the second time it became like a community town event where the community came together, the town came out, and it was really nice. But still, this idea, this iconic idea of looking into a DC-3 or just looking in the back of a plane and seeing legitimately the last 100 years of service all sitting there together side by side ready to fight and jump. It was just like this picture in my mind, like this has to be seen as big and as wide as possible. And so that's where, I guess, the third time it was COVID and nobody was doing live events. Nobody was doing really anything. And I was so bored that I'm like, we're doing this. We have to do this. We have to get Fox News. We have to get Fox Nation. We have to get anybody we can get to come to this thing. And we nailed it. And we did it in Kansas City at the World War I Museum and Monument. And
that was pretty spectacular.
That was absolutely it was the gnarliest thing. I remember the director of the museum basically just going, whew. And I'm like, what's up? And he says, dude, think I just did 50 interviews in a row. I'm smoked. And I was like, oh. And then there was like 50 more people there. And it was,
That museum was really cool.
oh my gosh. If you ever get a chance to go to Kansas City to see the National World War I Monument Museum, please go check it out. Dr. Naylor runs it. He's the director of the museum. And their team is amazing, but they procured thousands and thousands of artifacts from World War II from multiple
But not only
different
that,
countries.
just that when you go into the front of it, like it's all underground, like it was in a trench,
Oh, yeah.
like you were in the trenches in trench warfare.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really mind-boggling. And then all the poppies.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy.
Well, being there with you guys too, where we were sitting down doing interviews, and having me as the host of this show or having me as a host of any interview just seems so odd because I've never thought of myself as a host. But I got to sit in the interview and listen to every single one of your stories in
Yeah,
that setting. It was not only cool, it was emotional. It was really special.
very cool. And I mean, think about all the different age groups.
Yeah. We had 4 guys over 90. 4 guys jumping over 90 years old. Two World War II, 2 Korea. But this was the impetus of the Legacy Skydive with the Legacy Jump documentary.
And you know what? It kind of, well, you know this, but it blew my mind. That both of the World War II guys were always, they want to hear from us. And I'm like, really? Like, we want to hear from you guys. Like, oh, I didn't do anything special.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean
No
you didn't
doubt.
do anything special? I was a turret gunner in a B-17 bomber.
You just say, yes, sir.
I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Dude. And that's the exciting thing is this thing went off with such a blast that it was one of the most viewed Veterans Day live specials in years. I can't remember what they said, but years. And we made a documentary out of it called Legacy Jump, which will be coming out 2025 this year, which we're super excited about. Johnny, of course, is in all of that. So,
Can't wait to see that whole thing.
oh, I mean,
And it was cold coming out of that plane.
the story of how it was snowing and just nasty the day before and the winds were honking and we had everybody in town and everything about this
They
was
were worried about the
situationally
ceiling.
dependent.
They were worried about everything.
You know, talk about keeping your composure, and then the next day we wake up and it's like no wind, perfect, sunny, clear skies.
I want to say it was minus something degrees when we got out of the plane.
Oh, yeah, up at altitude for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man, we have been through a big journey together, and there's so much we could go into in detail and talk about, and we'll probably have you back for a mod too. But
We've got to talk about your 100-mile run.
I kind of want to forget about it.
Or the stair climb was pretty cool too.
It was. Yeah. There's a lot we're going to go through and dig into a mod 2 with you because we have a long history together and there's a lot to break into. But we'll leave that for the next one. On this one, I want to end by asking you a simple question, which is, who today do you want to honor? Tell us a short story of somebody you want to honor.
A short story that I want to honor. Well, I'll tell you, when I was a young kid, I watched the Dallas Cowboys a lot. And you know this, that I got to actually meet Roger Staubach, which was unbelievable. And he's probably the guy that won the Heisman, won the Super Bowl, and is in the Hall of Fame. That's how good a football player he is. Twice as nice as a person.
Yeah.
And yesterday was his 83rd birthday. And you don't see guys that lost 4 years of playing to be in the military and their persona is as big as you could possibly be, and yet they're most down to earth as you could possibly be.
Yeah.
And everybody should live their life like that. But, to him, to 83 years old, it's an influence. I'd like to say somebody in the fire service, but, that was something that was cool for me personally, was meeting. You're not always your childhood idols are as good as they seem.
Yeah.
This guy's better.
It's funny. I don't ever have anything to say when somebody honors somebody on this show because most of the time I don't know that person. But I do have something to say on this one because when you were meeting Staubach is when I was meeting Staubach.
Yeah.
And we were having a chat, and he asked me if I was in the teams, and I said yes, and found out that he was in the Navy. And I had no clue who he was because I grew up in Detroit and I didn't focus on football. It was hockey. And I remember right after having a chat with him, of course, he has a Dallas Star on his polo shirt. And
Yeah.
so I had an idea he had an affiliation with the Cowboys, but I think it was you and Sam Brown who came up and were like, "What was the good conversation?" I was like, "Yeah." Like giggly, like, "Who is this dude?" And they're like, "It's Roger Staubach." And I'm like,
It's like NFL royalty.
dude. And then it started to like really click in, like when a scary movie and that specific scene when all of a sudden you start noting that things are wrong. Roger Staubach's name's on the side of the actual building inside.
Yeah.
It's got a star on. You guys are giddy. I'm like, this guy's big time. What is he? And then you're like, oh yeah, he's the dude who created the Hail Mary, Heisman winner, and is a Super Bowl dude. And I'm like,
Well, I'm sure you've had people that you looked up to you in your life that you meet, and then you're like, that guy's a putz.
oh, for sure.
You know,
For
and
sure.
this guy, he looked at me and just says, how does a kid from New York become a Cowboys fan?
Yeah.
And I was like, they had this old Navy guy back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, and
You see him in town quite a bit too in Dallas.
yeah, you know, and he's just really as nice as they could be. And he actually said to me, he goes, whenever you come to this stadium, you come knock on this door and get me, and you don't sit in a regular seat anymore.
Amazing.
You know, and you don't find your childhood idol to be even better than you thought it would be.
Right. Yep. Well, my childhood idol doesn't speak English, so we got to deal with that. But hey, brother, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and just, being open and vulnerable and letting people in to maybe heal some of their wounds or understand that things are truly possible.
Always about paying it forward, man.
I know you are, man. We're going to do this again because we got a lot more to tap into. See, this was the serious side of Johnny, but he's got a wild side to him too. So we're going to dig into that one next time. I love you, brother. Thanks for coming on here, man.
You too, brother.
Frogman Friday. Long live the brotherhood.